So hello everybody again. So basically, yes, a lot of you know about the online the courses now and how they work. Apart from physical point holding, there's many other benefits of actually being in a group. And of course, not everybody's ready for that, but it's good to talk about the differences so you know if it's for you. A lot of people like to do things alone at home, do their own time and don't have to interact with anybody, but obviously you do clear a lot by interacting with people. It's quite often it's people who press those buttons, as you may find out. If you look at all your traumas you're releasing, it's all to the people, isn't it? They don't happen by themselves. And you find different people have triggers. And this is a big thing that's actually very useful. See, a lot of people try to avoid this, but actually if you're doing point holding with this kind of healing, you want stuff to come up. If there's people there who are going to trick you, that's fantastic. The important thing is not have to deal with it. If you're creating this space of unconditional love and non-judgment, you're welcoming everything, it's all good. Somebody triggers a feeling, you welcome it, it comes out, and you find everybody is helpful. Everybody is helping your process somehow, and you're helping theirs. Interesting that when people do come together, there's often karmic ties. The people who are in the same group as you are not there by accident. However you got there, whatever decisions you're making and things, whoever's in that group in the end seems to be all tied together karmically. And there's people there who are going to actually bring things up in you, both positive and negative. And so the transformation is fast. There's great potential there for people who actually worked with before in past lives, and there's energy flowing. Also, those who've had problems in the past lives, they surface, and the transformation is increased for that reason. To many people, they see this as a problem. They don't like to interact with people because of this karmic stuff coming up. But actually, if it's handled right, it's really good because it's like you clear much faster, you grow faster, you solve these issues. Everybody's then happy at the end and friendly again. Problems all solved. Everybody's grown. So first of all, it's understanding that you press most of your buttons by rubbing shoulders to humanity, not by sitting on your own somewhere on the mountaintop. Secondly, energy is increased when intention is combined. We've spoken about egregores before. You come together in a group, there's an egregore. You feel this to a degree when you do an online course because you're working with the same goal. If you're in the same room with the same intention, working intensely over the 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it is, every day, energy really builds up between you. Your intention is amplified, the strong egregore is created, which again catapult the body forward at a much higher rate. Things come up faster, you clear faster, the heat rises faster, kind of leaves rising, it gets hotter, you're burning your fingers. Everything comes up fast. It's amplified just by being in a group that way. So it's a way of actually amplifying things just by being in that group and combining intentions. Of course, you've got me there as well, although I can guide you from a distance. When I'm actually there looking in the iris, I can point things out to you so you see what it look like. So you'll get to know how to read irises because you'll see examples. You watch them change as well. You find this work, the eye changes pretty fast. You look at the eye before point holding, look at it afterwards, and it's already changing. That's how powerful this is. Usually I would change over a period of time. This way you get to see what's done. You know the session's finished because at the end of it, that lesion that was in the eye before has gone, already healing.
I think that's a really important point to reiterate, is that Peter does do a personal iris reading on all of you. Every time it's your turn to have your points held, he will be looking in your iris and he will be identifying the key areas that need healing for you first, before moving on to the next part.
And obviously you look at it as well, you'll be able to see what I'm finding in the eyes, you can do it too. So by the end of the course, you'll be an expert in iridology as well. You'll be able to see things in irises, you know what they look like. It's not just by looking in a book anymore. You're actually seeing it live. I'm putting things out and you watch them changing. You see what lesions look like and how they heal. So you get a lot of experience. If you're interested in iridology, this is the fast way to learn.
Yeah, so pack your magnifying glass in your luggage.
Maybe a little torch, you can try it into the eye and see more clearly. Not too strong, obviously, you don't want to blame them.
No, but that is a magnificent piece, because that was one of the things that did fascinate me when I was doing it, is the fact that you've got Peter on hand, looking at really where your key areas are, focusing right where the impact is needed, and literally being able to observe the changes for yourself. Yeah, that was really powerful.
This is useful because obviously you can pick the points as you do online by finding where they hurt. But obviously you look at the iris first, you know what you're looking for in the first place. You know which organs will have lesions, where the problem is going to be. Therefore, you already know which points you need to hold to where the main problem is. Sometimes it's very important, because sometimes there's an important order of how you do things. Although you generally work from below upwards, going down to spleen and so on. Sometimes you usually get too quickly and have to kind of bypass a few things. For example, most people privately, they have impending heart attacks coming. You see light being coming to the iris, you can see heart attacks getting really close. In that case, you do that first. We don't wait to go through anything else, you go straight to the heart. You know, you don't want to wait till the bad heart attack before you get to it. You know, you can actually see it when things are coming as well. You see, there are signs of impending heart attacks, impending disease before they actually happen. As the veins are getting close to the iris, you can see all these things happening. There are signs of impending death as well. So it's good to know these, so you can actually heal the important bits before it gets too bad. So there are times in actually when looking at the iris is going to save a life, because rather than simply work up through the normal order, you have to jump a few things to get to what's important at that time. So the iris will actually reveal what's really needed at that moment, what the person needs to do first. No, thankfully, you don't have many who are that bad. You know, you come to a course, you're probably not dying. You're just coming to kind of for your growth and so on. So it's not an issue, but it can be. It's good to know these things when you look at the iris, to know actually what to do first, so you're ready for any emergency situation. It also gives you a good sign of what's going to come up. For example, if there has been a heart attack before, then go through memory of it. If I look at an iris and I see this little vein has gone into the iris and it's going to already been a heart attack, I know when those points are going to go through memory. So I'm ready for it. If a person seems to be going through a heart attack, I know it's a memory. It's nothing to panic about. You check their pulse and it's normal, you know, it's just a memory. So things like that are useful just so you don't panic. You can actually see what's going to come up. So you can see that actually when you do this work in person, this way it can get very intense. You do with very serious problems, serious diseases, and you can watch more clearing. And that's where it's very useful to do the diagnosis here. And can be there with you to go through the end of it to make sure it's complete. See the iris change, so you know that actually that impending disease is over. So although this is great for personal growth at home, when you're actually dealing with serious diseases, you want to make sure it is completed. And this with iridology and knowing what to look for becomes very useful. Other big thing about it is that one thing we don't do in the online version of the course is the spine and the cranial, simply because you can't beat your own spine. The cranial is something that's very intricate and delicate, and I want to make sure I'm there to guide it fully in person, simply because same points, but they have to be done exactly right. I don't want anybody getting this wrong, so you end up with a lopsided head. There's 3 points we do in the cranial, and it's very important to cranial work because this is what actually gets the head to be an amplifier again. You see, when the head is restored to its perfect configuration as an amplifier, you can amplify your thought power up to 10,000 times. So you want this to fully get your kind of spiritual and magical powers fully up to scratch. You have to get this amplifier working. And you also find that most of the early traumas, before the sutures are closed, are kind of stored in the cranial. All the emotional stuff is up there. And when you start shifting the head around, you know, it's you get to this really deep stuff. And this is why it gets to the power amplification. You can watch the deeper issues you get into your spiritual power. But it's delicate. Because price points do some inside the jaw, for instance, which has to be done in a certain place, 3 places at once, up in the cheekbone, back of the pterygoid plate, inside the jawbone. When you get the precise points, it all changes. And this has to be precise. So I like to be there to actually guide people in person. We never do that part online because I need to be sure that it's done properly. So there are certain things you need to be there in person for. Much else, anything else can be done online. And as you're finding out now, the Chandali works over distance, the empowerments are over distance, I can guide you. It's all great. But just these few extra points that worth considering if you want to come to an in-person course. It's more intense. You're also giving more time to it because you're doing it every day for 1, 2, or 3 weeks. In that time, your power builds up because you're focusing it so much. You know, by the mid-week, you're already actually going much faster anyway. You can actually make huge breakthroughs on that. So it's good for the intensity of making breakthroughs. It's good to be guiding there personally, but it's good to be in group energy, we're amplifying each other. So those are the main benefits of being on one of these courses, as different from doing it online.
And I think
doing it online, that's great too, but this is a few extras.
I just want to share a couple of personal experiences where it's particularly when we were doing the cranial work. Like you say, this is this particular piece you can only do in person. And this particular section really took me right back to the beginning of my life. And I remember actually I had such an intense session with one particular point that all of my death wishes that I'd had at the point of birth, like the fact that I didn't want to come into this life, I didn't want to live, I didn't want to be here. I remember I picked up Sam's knife and it was a blunt knife, everyone. It was a blunt knife. And I was literally like just reliving like the fact that I didn't want to be here, and the noises that, oh gosh, and all of that had been held inside of me, and none of that would have come out if I had not pressed that point. And that was a really, really intense one, just reliving those and removing all of those death wishes. And I remember another point when we were doing the spine, there was a big crack. At one point, there was a big crack that went all the way down my spine. And I remember Sam saying, well, someone's just birthed a dragon. I was like, oh. And then there was another point where I was triggered. Again, this was a spinal point. I was actually point holding somebody else, someone else's spine. And I was triggered so intensely by the 3 people in my group. I just remember being so paralyzed with anger because I was so worried that if I move, I'm going to hurt someone. And again, just being able to have that observation of the intensity of this emotion that I had been holding in. And I wouldn't have been able to have triggered that by myself. That had to have been done through other people. So the intensity of this in-person work is huge. Which point was that, Carrie? No idea. I had someone sticking their fingers. No, she was asking at the point with the cranium. I had someone sticking their fingers in my mouth. I don't know which point that was.
It's what we call the triple axis. It's actually 3 points you do at once. You go inside the mouth, you go up underneath the cheekbone, behind the jawbone, and push right back to what's called the pterygoid plate. So you've got your tip of the finger 1 point, back your finger inside the jaw, and the top of the finger up against the cheekbone. These 3 points at once, when they're all together, is what makes a big change. And it seems to affect all the sutures around here. So whole head rearranges, basically. It's almost like do the whole head through 3 points in 1 finger. Very intense.
Yes. It really, really is intense. And we've got a couple of people who are also experiencing not wanting to incarnate into this life. So you never know what you're going to find. It's
a big one. Yes, this goes back to the early stuff. You see, there's an order in which we suppress things. In a baby, the suture's wide open. And so, by the time we get 8 or 9, the sutures are closing and start to calcify. So actually it's really flexible at first. And the first traumas are stored in the head. You find that the head then affects the bone of the spine. And then the spine supplies nerve to the organs. So you actually work back in order. You work the organs first, you clear the spine, so you get the nerve supply back to the organs. And when you clear the head, it gets to actually the root of the spinal scoliosis as well. The whole spine finally realigns fully after the head's done. Well, they can do individual lesions in the spine. When you do the head, the whole spine is fully aligned. It becomes perfect. Basically, it gets deeper cause. You see, with the organs, yes, they can heal by point holding, but sometimes if the nerve supply is restricted to that organ, it won't heal. And the nerve supply is restricted by the spine. So sometimes you can't complete the organ until you clear the spine as well, because you have to get the nerve supply to it. What happens if you've got injuries in the spine that calcifies? That calcification will actually close the gaps so the nerves being restricted. So a lot of the problems are caused by lesions in the spine. So sometimes you have to get to the spine to actually get to the cause of get the deeper roots of the rest of the thing so it can complete its healing. Then when there is a spinal scoliosis, you find the cause of that is actually the cranium. In cranial osteopathy, they say that cranial scoliosis precedes spinal scoliosis, which means if the head's distorted, the spine starts going out of shape. This is not the same as individual lesions, something's not out of place and calcifies. It means the whole thing can be a little bit outlined, it'll be twisted the wrong way. You have spines that are not straight, what we call scoliosis when it's curved wrongly. This all starts in the head. So naturally, as you go back to these layers, you get to the root of where the spine has gone wrong. Of course, when the spine's wrong, if it's throw so many things out, your balance is gone. You might seem that one leg is short the other because the spine's twisted, and then it affects the organs, affects your movement, so many things. And nearly everybody has got some problem in the spine without noticing it. They get so used to actually working in that way. And when you clear it, your movement suddenly so more free and balanced. It's amazing the difference. You didn't know how how good you could feel. When the energy line of the spine continues there, and there's no restriction on anything, there's such perfect energy that you feel alive for the first time. Yeah. Some people like to come back and do it again because it feels so good. But obviously, the second time you do cranial, it's not as bad. I don't necessarily recommend people do cranial every year simply because you cleared lifetimes of stuff in one go. It's not going to be there anymore. It's done. You're only going to have the backlog, last year's resistance if you've been resisting stuff to come out, no, you haven't been resisting, so it shouldn't be anymore. If you actually learn these principles and apply them, you don't build up any more resistance. You don't store any more problems. But if you have, then do it again, you get the rest of it out. The second time should be much easier because, the first time you're clearing your whole lifetime, the prenatal stuff and your genetic stuff from your parents, there's so much coming out, it only has to be done once basically to clear it out. And maybe now and then to a little top up to make sure it's still clear.
Yes, we've got someone saying that they felt like a superhero at the end of 2 weeks. I remember at the end of 3 weeks, I felt like a completely blank canvas.
Oh yeah.
I was completely blank. And I remember not knowing people's names sometimes. I was like, but what it's demonstrated to me was I'd cleared so much of the crap that it had created this blank canvas from which I could choose what I wanted to create and move forward with.
Exactly.
What do I want to fill these gaps with? And I made some very critical life decisions in those very first few days after the point holding course. And my life has catapulted in such a very different direction since, because I knew I had this opportunity that I didn't know if I was going to ever have again, where I had to really make some good life choices.